Om Ponmudishwaraya Namaha.
I'm Kalaivani Chengappa, wife of Bobby Chengappa and daughter of Soundaravalli and C.K. Rangaswamy Gounder of Puravipalayam. My mother, Soundaravalli is the daughter of the erstwhile Zamindar of Puravipalayam, Ponmalai Velayuthaswamy Gopanna Mandradiar, and she is the only sister of the last Zamindar of Puravipalayam, Mandalati Gopanna Mandradiar. I had one brother, Murli Manohar. When I was around 7 years old, my father, C.K. Rangaswamy Gounder, who was then the chief of security at the Prime Minister's office for Shri Jawaharlal Nehru, and he was also the winner of the President's Gold Medal for meritorious service. He suddenly fell ill in Delhi, New Delhi, with a massive heart attack. And he was taken care of in Delhi by the Prime Minister's office. And after he recovered, he was sent back home. And all of us were very worried about his health because the attack was a very severe one. It was at that point of time, like a blessing, one of my mother's friends, that is the wife of Charitable Zamindar, who was living in Racecourse, sent a message to my mother saying that a Swamiji has come to stay with them from Chennai. And she suggested that my mother come and see him and seek blessings in order to help my dad to get better, faster, and lead a healthy life. So one evening, my mother and my aunt, that is Mandalati Gopanna Mandradiar's wife, Swarna Gandhi Amma, and myself decided to visit Nekarimapatti Zamindar's bungalow, which was on Racecourse Road. And then we were taken upstairs because they said the Swamiji is staying on the terrace of their upstairs, the first floor. So when we went up there was a wide terrace with a balcony, and also there was a room where Swamiji was resting. And I, as a little girl, was very surprised to see a gentleman, he looked very tall then and very strong and very sprightly and with a long beard. And since I had not seen any of my grandfathers, I thought maybe this must be another grandfather in the making. So immediately when they told me to say namaskar, I said namaskar Tata. So with that, his name Tata is stuck all his life, and even now, all his devotees know him as Tata's family. It so happened that the Naikarapati Zamindar's son, Mr. Tulsidaran, was a close friend of mine since we were in class 3 together at St. Joseph's Convent. So I was very happy to visit Tata Swami whenever my mother and my aunt went to see him, because it was an opportunity for me to play with Tulsidaran. And then sometimes we both would go up and we would also play with Swamiji. And Swamiji was very fond of us two little kids who were very naughty and who used to pull his beard and keep asking him what his name was, for which we never got a reply. We would ask him what's his name, we would ask him where he is from, and he would say, call me by whatever name you want. I belong to this world. There's Kodi Appa Amma and Kodi Urugal. So you can decide whichever name you want. You can give me. You can decide where I come from. You yourself can decide who my parents are, because there's Kodi people in this world and everybody is one and the same. But at that point in time, we were too small to understand what he meant, that the world was universal, that all men and women and all human beings were equal in the eyes of God. So I made many visits with my mother, Soundaravalli Ammal, my aunt, Varnakandi Ammal, to see Swamiji at Nekarpati Zamin Bungalow. And he used to be very fond of me, and many a time he used to lift me up and put me on his lap. And at that instant, I would pull his long hair and I would pull his beard. And his reply to that will only be a loud peal of laughter. But before one such visit, we were told by my mother's friend, my Karpati Zamindar's wife, that Swamiji had suddenly moved to a farmhouse belonging to a relative of theirs a few kilometers from the racecourse bungalow. And so on our next visit, all of us went to the farmhouse and we made some 2-3 visits to see Swamiji in the farmhouse. And on one such visit one evening, when we went there, it was getting dark. And Swamiji had a lot of other devotees who were sitting in the hall, just inside the front balcony of the farmhouse. And there were a lot of devotees sitting on the floor and then just generally talking to Swamiji or listening to him. So we also just sat down on the Jamkalam at the back of the crowd, and we were also listening to Swamiji and just waiting for him to call us to say a few words to him. At that point of time, suddenly Swamiji jumped up from his chair and he literally crossed all the ladies sitting on the Jamkalam. He rushed out of the front door onto the balcony, and instead of going down the steps of the balcony to the front yard of the farmhouse, he jumped over the veranda of the balcony. It was quite a high balcony. It was not a short balcony. He jumped over the veranda of the balcony, the wall of the veranda, and then rushed towards the open space where all the visitors' cars were parked. And then he kept walking very fast, and it looked like he went to one of the cars and asked the driver of the car who was standing outside to open the door for him to sit down. In the meantime, there was utter confusion and chaos in the hall, visitors' hall, where all the devotees were seated in the Jamkalam. So everybody jumped up and they all ran behind Swamiji, including the owners of the farmhouse, and wanted to know whose car it was that Swamiji had gotten to. And we were lagging behind, 3 of us, my mother, aunt, and myself, not realizing that it was our car into which Swamiji had gotten. And we were shouting, people were shouting, asking, whose car is this? Whose car is this? And then we heard the driver, Gundu Ramasamy, replying, this is the car belonging to Puravipalayam Zamindar, Jaganmandaladipati Gopanna Mandradiar. Then they called out to my mother and my aunt and they said, please come, it looks like Swamiji has got into your car. And my mother and aunt were really shocked to see Swamiji sitting inside the car, and for a few moments they became speechless and they really didn't know what to say or to do. Then they realized that they have to ask Swamiji to get down from the car, and it is not right for them to take Swamiji away in this hurried fashion. So my mother and my aunt pleaded with Swamiji and they said, Swamiji, please come back, go in and sit down, and then we'll come again on another day in the morning, and then in a proper manner we will take you with us. All the requests went in vain, and Swamiji just sat stubbornly in the front seat and said, no, I'm not getting down from this car. And he himself called to driver Gundu Ramasamy and told him, come, get into the car and drive me. I want to go to your bungalow. And that was it. The donors pleaded, the other devotees pleaded, my mom and aunt pleaded, but to no avail. And finally, we gave up because Swamiji was very, very adamant. And he said, I will not be getting down from the car and I'm coming with you all. And that was it. So that evening, maybe around 7 o'clock, after the sun had gone down, in a very confused manner, but my mother and aunt had no choice, and they drove Swamiji to Holy Bungalow, where he was received by my father and my grandmother. So we arrived in Holy Bungalow around 7:30 in the evening, and there was my father in the front hall with my grandmother, and we had no means of informing them that we were bringing Swamiji with us. So they were also utterly surprised to see Swamiji getting down from the car. And he strided into the house, and there also he found an easy chair to sit down in the front hall. He never went into the bungalow beyond the front hall, and it was there that he stayed for many days before we brought him to Puravipalayam. Swamiji sat down and made himself very comfortable in the easy chair, and my mother and aunt narrated the whole incident to my dad and to my grandmother, who then came and welcomed Swamiji and got his blessings. And that is where he stayed for many days. And after a few days, there were a lot of other devotees who had heard about his presence in Holy Bungalow, who started coming to visit him. And since my dad was still recovering from his heart attack, and my mother and my aunt were not prepared for so many visitors who had come to take Swamiji's blessings, so they were wondering what they should do and how they should handle the situation. When one fine day, Swamiji himself suggested that he wanted to go to your ஊருக்கு கூட்டிட்டு போ தாத்தா. So then my mom said, we cannot take him there without getting my senior grandmother's permission, who was the one who was deciding everything in the palace at Puravipalayam. So then they sent a message again. Those days there was no telephone in Puravipalayam. So they sent a message to my senior grandmother, informing her that Swamiji had expressed his desire to come to Puravipalayam and stay there, to which she readily agreed. So it was decided on a particular day in the morning after breakfast for all of us to be driven by Gundu Ramaswamy in the black Vauxhall car to the palace in Puravipalayam. But my father, since he could not travel, he did not accompany us. So Swamiji was seated in the front seat, and my mother, my aunt, and myself were seated in the back seat. And that's how we took a slow drive to Puravipalayam Palace, because the roads those days was very, very bad and it was full of potholes. So after a very tedious journey, we arrived at the palace. We drove into the main gate and straight to the main door of the Darbar Hall. And since we had already informed, my mother and aunt had already informed the Zamindar that Swamiji was coming with us, the Zamindar, Mandradiar, Gopanna Mandradiar, his second wife, Mal, and his sons, Giriraj Gopanna Mandradiar, Velayuthaswamy Gopanna Mandradiar, and his daughters, Pushpa Gopanna Mandradiar, Manikam Gopanna Mandradiar, and Kanyakumari Gopanna Mandradiar, along with my senior grandmother, Pachai Maragaduvalli Thayamma, were all waiting in front of the main Darbar hall door to receive Swamiji and to take him in. At that point, Swamiji himself, he did not wait for the driver to open the door. He himself opened the door and jumped out, and then looked around and looked upstairs. His head was turned up and he started gazing upstairs. And then he didn't say anything for a few minutes. Then everybody said, Namaskaram Tata, Namaskaram Swami, Ullavanga, Ullavanga. But he did not respond. He just stood there and looked upstairs. Then all that he said was, எனக்கு தாத்தா இந்த கதவை எனக்கு திறக்க சொல்லுங்க. Nobody expected it because there was a small door on the left and the veranda, front veranda, and that door was leading to a very narrow, steep staircase which was going to the terrace upstairs. Nobody understood how Swamiji knew that there was a small door to the left and that it would take him upstairs. And he said, அந்த கதவை திறக்க சொல்லுங்க தாத்தா, நான் மேல போகணும். And they said, no Swamiji, வாங்க உள்ள வந்து நீங்க உட்கார்ந்து ஏதாவது சாப்பிட்டுட்டு பால் இல்லை சாப்பிட்டுட்டு வாழைப்பழம் சாப்பிட்டுட்டு அப்புறம் மேல போலாம் வாங்க. இல்ல தாத்தா நான் மேல போகணும், அது திறக்க சொல்லு. And he just stood there and he would not move. So then my grandmother asked the Jamindar to bring the key. And the door was open, but the door is usually not used at all. Very rarely we use that staircase to go upstairs to the terrace. It is used only during the mango season, when mangoes are plucked from the mango orchards and hundreds of baskets of mangoes are taken up on that particular, using that staircase to the rooms upstairs. And it used to be placed there and covered with straw for ripening. That is the only time we used to use that staircase. Otherwise, it is never used by the family at all. So everybody was surprised that Swamiji wanted to use that staircase and go up. But he did. He literally ran up the veranda, went through that narrow door, climbed onto the steep steps, and walked very briskly up the steps onto the terrace of the first floor. And all the others were too stunned to follow him quickly. And since I was a little girl, I literally ran behind Swamiji and kept following his footsteps up the staircase. And halfway up, he just paused. And then he said these words. And then he crossed onto the terrace and strided across the terrace to a veranda where again there was a wooden chair in which he sat down. After which the rest of the family followed him, those who could. The others used the main staircase from the Darbar hall, which was the one which is normally used by the family to go on to the terrace. And when they reached there, Swamiji had already made himself comfortable in the chair. And then he was looking around and making out as if he's been there all his life and that it was a very familiar spot for him. And he announced, when all arrived over there, he announced that this is my place and this is where I'm going to stay. And if ever I come down from this place, down these steps, you will never see me. And that is where he stayed till he attained, what is the word you would use?
He attained Siddhi.
Till he attained Siddhi. And that is the final journey which he made down those very steps upon which he had gone up 30 years ago. And thus Kodi Swami, Kodi Tata arrived on the terrace of Puravipalayam Palace, and he enjoyed his walks on the terrace in the evenings, and he would get onto the parapet walls on either side of the two balconies, and he would perch himself on the corner of the parapet wall, and he will be talking to the 5 elements of nature: the sun, the moon, the wind, the rain, the birds, especially the crows. And if there are any dogs running around in the backyard of the palace, he would also have a lot of kind words to say to them, and very affectionately he would be conversing with the elements of nature. And he enjoyed doing this